Welcome back. One incredible revelation after the Me Too movement. How many companies didn't have written sexual harassment policies? And a lot of those companies have had to learn some hard lessons. No more companies, including here on the Suncoast, are coming up with detailed policies and making sure employees are aware of them. In some cases, firms are fundamentally changing the way they do business to make sure that their products don't promote sexual exploitation. And joining us for more are John Lemp, who is the CEO and founder of Sarasota-based Rev Content, and Gail Farb, who is an employment attorney with Sarasota-based Williams Parker. Thank you and welcome to you both. John, let me ask you this, because the one thing that really kind of got me about what your company is doing right now is taking a look at what your company puts out there in terms of preventing sexual exploitation and sexually explicit content. What do you mean by that?
Well, I appreciate you having us on the show too, Alan. But yeah, what I would say is, when we look at this, it's content that's within our advertising platform. So so that's content that advertisers might show on different websites, and that's so we work with a lot of news sites, and they'll essentially have related articles, related ads at the bottom, and when they have those, it's the types of images, the types of advertisements that are on there.
So what kind of thought process took place in terms of coming to the conclusion that what sometimes you were putting out there is maybe stuff that you shouldn't be putting out there?
Well, we have a lot of responsibility. I feel like we have a significant reach. We're reaching hundreds of billions of impressions every single month. So we're reaching a lot of people, people across the U.S. And when I look at this movement, what I see is a cultural issue. I see something that's much bigger, and that's something that we need to address. And for me, it's just being a Christian, having two daughters that are growing up that are using the internet all the time. It's like, I don't want to be a part of the problem. And when I look at it, it's like, people say sex sells. Like advertising is like, it's all about sex. It's all about show this or show that. It's like, I don't want to be, having a system that, that has anything that's even remotely, bikinis, anything like that, that's remotely wrong. And we knew we needed help on this. That's why we went to a third party, which is the Center for National Sexual Exploitation, to say, hey, you know what? Tell us the standards that we should be living by.
And I want to dive into that a little bit more in a few minutes. But Gail, a lot of the companies are making decisions like this. They may not all be advertisers, but they deliver a product in one form or another, and they have to make new decisions in terms of whether that's appropriate to basically the realizations that many management companies have had.
Sure. I'm sure that employers all around the country are looking at not only their policies on how they treat employees, but what kind of image they want to represent themselves to their public and to their customers.
One thing that has amazed me since the Me Too movement got going is how many companies did not have sexual harassment policies that were written and that employees were aware of.
I don't know what the numbers are, but I've definitely read articles that it's surprising how many employers have not started getting policies into place if they didn't have them already.
What did you see in terms of your business after these stories kept on coming out in terms of companies coming to your firm and asking for help?
We definitely had an uptick in people coming in not only for policies, either to review them or to suggest different policies, but also do training on the topic.
John, so for a moment you talked about your content, but what did you do in terms of the policies at your company?
So this is that's a really great question, because it's something that actually we've already had in place, and then and every year we actually we were just talking about it earlier. Every year we actually we have a meeting for the company, and we have training and training that goes, because it's not only about having a policy, it's about the training that's associated with it.
Okay, we are just getting warmed up, and we'll have much more on being proactive when it comes to sexual harassment policies in the workplace right after we check the first alert weather. So stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about how some Suncoast companies are being proactive when it comes to sexual harassment policies, and joining us for more are John Lemp, CEO and founder of Sarasota-based Rev Content, and Gail Farb, an employment attorney at Sarasota-based Williams and Parker. And John, let me ask you about something that you've said publicly, and that is trying to change advertising. That's what your company does. It's an online advertiser, creating advertisements for companies not only here but around the country. But you said that we need to change the advertising industry to reflect the importance of this movement. We cannot allow sexually explicit imagery to continue to degrade women if we hope to win the fight against sexual harassment. I'm trying to relate this to other things that we have seen out there, whether it's people who argue about violence in video games. Can you blame the content for the behavior in the workplace and elsewhere?
So I think it's a great question, and I want to talk with regards to sort of censorship specifically, and then that concept, but then talking about the advertising associated with it. What I believe good advertising is doing is creating a strong relationship between a user and a product or a service. And what I would say is the problem when I see it in advertising specifically is that with that, is that the type of relationship a brand wants? Is that the type of relationship or the type of effect is just some cheap click that a person just because it's very sexualized or very in that manner? And that's where I see the issue within advertising, is that I feel like it's the same thing. It's a very same correlation with if you're talking about managing employees. It's like managing employees, and we were talking about some of the different aspects of that. It's like you're either building genuine relationships or you're not, or you're just you're trying to get some cheap thing to just like if you can't change a culture of a company if you just you have a meeting and says, hey, sexual harassment's an issue. It's like, let's actually address this. You're going to change it by actually addressing it, and then changing the culture in general. But I don't agree with censorship, I would say, per se. So it's like video games, what you're talking about in that way. But I do say that when you have a network that reaches as many people as we reach with terms of our advertising, same thing as Facebook, same thing as Twitter. It's those types of systems and those types of networks, they have a responsibility, and they have a responsibility that just like TV and radio has responsibility.
Gail, this is a difficult area to talk about, and I was saying during the break, I was watching a roundtable with Ted Koppel, the famous newsman, who said, hey, you gotta bring it up. Sometimes it's about the way women dress in the workplace. Maybe dressing less provocatively is one of the issues that has to at least be talked about. When he said that on the panel he was on, he was really derided. But if we're talking about our advertising, should we also be talking about that? Well,
dress codes are important, as well as the image that you want your company to portray. I don't think it's necessarily women's dress alone that would be responsible for sexual harassment at all. John made a good point that if you're going to change a culture of a company, you need to do it from the top down and really own it. So if part of the culture is that we treat each other with respect and dignity, you want to dress professionally. You don't say don't dress provocatively, but dress professionally. How do you want to be expressed for your clients, for your customers, and to the public? I think that's the best way to focus on a dress code.
One other area that I did want to ask you about is the number of sexual harassment complaints that are coming forward these days, and I know a fair number of women who have been in difficult situations before, and their main concern was if they did file a complaint to HR, this may adversely affect their professional careers in the future. Is this something the legal profession and the business world is trying to get a handle on these days?
We are. One part of a good policy against harassment or harassment prevention is the anti-retaliation portion of it. The person who brings a complaint needs to be reminded that they are not going to be retaliated within the company. The alleged harasser is also told you cannot retaliate. And then if the agreement or the investigation into the allegations is kept confidential, that information should not get outside the company, so it shouldn't prevent them from being treated fairly later on.
But isn't the problem that sometimes that information does get outside the company, and that's what victims might be concerned about?
It could, but sometimes it's victims who mention it. If an investigation in a company doesn't keep it confidential, then shame on the company. It should keep it as confidential as possible. When you do an investigation, you're going to have to know some facts. You have to know who the alleged harasser is, you need to know who the witnesses are, and you need to be able to talk to them. You ask them to keep it as confidential as possible, but it's only so much that you can do. You can't be totally anonymous, or it's very hard for the alleged harasser to try to rebut whatever they're being accused of.
John, you said that you were doing a lot of these things before the advent of the Me Too movement, but how have things changed in terms of your company and how you're trying to manage these situations when they come up since the Me Too movement got going?
Yeah, I think I think the best part about this is the fact that it's actually creating a conversation. I mean, it's creating a conversation about issues that I think that we just don't tend to talk about as often. So, and that's the thing is these more difficult issues, are now coming up in conversations more. So that's what led to us sort of.
So give me an example. What has a typical man in your company said to you about how to just deal with everyday conversations with women in the workplace? What have women said to you?
Yeah, I would say it's what led to the conversation of what could we do to help. It's specifically in which led to this decision and this this where we started investigating and saying, hey, how can we change the culture? But specifically within the company, I would say is we have a unique company. It's and it's interesting. It's not like so we don't have a company where everybody says you have to dress a certain way or do that. But it's a culture where there's there's a lot of individual freedom and individual creativity, and but there's also sort of it's a culture of sort of respect. So respect for each other, and and there's we have a lot of conversations and difficult conversations, and that's a part of one of our values is just is a courage of communication. And courage of communication means to address and have those difficult conversations first. So with Me Too, I'd say is it's something that we haven't actually. I haven't seen us actually have too many more of those types of conversations.
Yeah, we have less than a minute left right here, but are there still companies out there that are kind of slow on the switch?
There probably are. More and more are getting on the ball and either creating policies or asking for them or training their employees on how to do things right.
Okay. We have to take a quick break, and we'll be back for final thoughts in a moment, so stay with us. And our guest joining us right now for final thoughts. And Gail, let me start with you, because despite everything that we have lived through over the last couple of months, I still imagine there are people out there who are concerned to go to the company and file a complaint because, sometimes in the corporate culture, there is concern about retribution, no matter what the written policy is.
Well, I understand that, and a lot of people have waited for a long time. But if the people believe they're being harassed, don't come forward, then there's nothing the employer can do unless they actually see whatever is actionable or potentially actionable. So it's vital for the victims to come forward and come and say something to someone. And usually the policies are going to give multiple avenues of ways or who they can go to, whether it's HR, their manager, or anybody in management, and bring it forward, and that way somebody can investigate.
And John, I want to go back to one of the most interesting parts of our conversation, how you're hoping to change the advertising world, because the advertising world in this day and age really use a lot of provocative images and messages to sell products. How are you going to take all that on and stay in business?
Yeah, it's a great question. It does mean sacrificing revenue, and that's a decision that we made together as a team. And when we looked at that's men, that's women. It's we looked at it together and we said, hey, how can we change this? What can we do? And that's the thing is our competitors. We look at Facebook. It's and other guys out there. It's like they're not willing to do this. So this is something that I'd say for us to make that change was very important to us just personally. And I would say it's and yeah, it is definitely something that needs to change. Look at Hollywood. Look at that and look at the effects that they've had.
Okay, you have to leave it there. FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And for the latest on local breaking news, don't forget to download the updated version of our app. If your current app doesn't work, it's expired, just go to the App Store and re-download it by searching for WWSB or My Suncoast. We want to thank both our guests for being here tonight. John Lemp is CEO and founder of Sarasota-based Rev Content, I'll get that right, and Gail Farb, an employment attorney at Sarasota-based Williams Parker.